When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. The genius of the Christ. One verse, one compound sentence, and everything is told us. Jesus tells us Daniel wrote a book. Now you look at that and you say, where did he say Daniel wrote a book? Whoso readeth, let him understand. So he wrote something that could be read. Daniel was a prophet. When you see that which was spoken by Daniel the prophet come to pass. So Daniel the prophet receives the endorsement of Jesus Christ. He was a prophet. He wrote a book. His book may be understood. Whoso readeth, let him understand. And he predicted in the future, and his predictions will come to pass. So we are among those who read in Daniel the prophet, with the hope that we shall understand what he wrote, as he predicted things that should come to pass, that would one day be fulfilled by the events which coincided with the predictions. There are many, of course, who do not believe in Daniel. They think that he is a history written by some forger after the events, that what Daniel is trying to do is archaize. He goes back and he tries to make out that he is writing long before the events took place. Now, Jesus said that he was a prophet. A prophet tells us before events come to pass, long before they come to pass, the way they will come to pass. Now, this kind of criticism, started by Porphyry, has reached a crescendo in the 19th century in the higher and the lower critics of the book of Daniel. But I always think of the second psalm in contexts like this. He that sitteth in the heavens will laugh. God must have a sense of humor. He created men in his own image. And there are times when he chuckles. And I can conceive of one time when he chuckled. When you go into a library of some large seminary, theological school, and see all the books that contain criticisms of Daniel, and there are many, all of which are based on the theory that he was written after the time of the Maccabees, after the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. That's in the 2nd century BC, middle and nearer to our time. And then you suddenly read that an unknown goat herd, Bedouin, scrambling up the Judean escarpments that dip down to the Dead Sea, finds a cave. Boy curiosity makes him look in. It's pitch dark. He can't see a thing. He doesn't know the gaulies and the ghosties and the long-leggedy beasties that might be inside there. And so he takes a rock and he throws it into that hole, and he hears it hit an earthenware pot, and he listens to the tinkling shattering of that piece of ceramic ware and runs away and hides. But no virago of a Bedouin mother comes out of the cave, and he plucks up courage after a little while. He looks behind the shelter of his rock, and there's nobody there. Then he creeps back up, boy-like, and listens. Dead silence. And like many speleologists, he decides to go inside. So he creeps in, and when he's there for a little while and his eyes get used to the darkness, he sees the pot he had taken care of. But by the side of it, he sees other pots, about 36 inches high and about 14 inches in diameter, with mouths that are about 9 inches in diameter, over which there is an almost flat cap. He looks inside, and inside there are rolls of leather. Some of them have a very funny smell. But he gets a chunk, doesn't know what they are. He crawls back out. And when he takes his goats home that night to his uncle for whom he's working, he tells his uncle what he found. And his uncle follows him up. It's 800 feet high. That fellow must have been quite a hiker. He goes up the side of that ragged, red sandstone crag, and they drop in, and they find quite a few scrolls. That was the beginning of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they were sold, you remember, finally in New York, and they've been sold back to Israel, and in Jerusalem, Israeli Jerusalem, of course it's all Israeli now, the Temple of the Book has been erected with the Dead Sea Scrolls right in their center. Now the price of Dead Sea Scrolls went skyrocketing. The last time I inquired, they cost $3.50 for a piece as big as your thumbnail, if your thumbnail is a square centimeter. $3.50 a square centimeter. Now the Habakkuk scroll that they showed some years ago in the same place where the Gutenberg Bible and the Constitution are framed and guarded in the Library of Congress was 13 feet long. The Isaiah scroll is 5 times as long. The Habakkuk scroll was only about 12 inches or 13 inches wide and about 13 feet long. It's got lots of square centimeters in that. And the Isaiah scroll was much wider and 5 times as long, and so there are lots more square centimeters in it. So you know what happens? You cut it up and give it to all your friends. That's what happens. And so there's a higher price if you give a whole one, uncut. So all you've got to do is to find, another scroll of Isaiah or Psalms, maybe 80 feet long, and you've got it made. Why not go look? Well, all the Arabs are looking, and they found at least 16 caves. And there are many more Dead Sea Scrolls unbought yet than the ones that have been brought in, because who's going to pay that? The Jordanian government hasn't got that kind of money. And the Arabs haven't crossed over into Israel, so I hope these scrolls that have been found already, that are there secreted in many an Arab tent, will not be lost. Of course, God has preserved them now for 1800 years. He can preserve them again for another 18, I'm quite sure. But in these Dead Sea Scrolls have been found many fragments of the book of Daniel. In fact, some were found, as I understand, in cave number 4, which is quite close by. You can crawl into it and drop down, come out another place. It's only 100 feet away from the Qumran community. And these fragments are well over 200 BC in age. Nobody knows quite. But they were written, and they're copies of copies made long before the time of the Maccabees. Now Josephus tells us in his dissertation Contra Appion about Daniel, he claims it was written 600 years, 550 years BC. Earliest records of Daniel. Of course, Ezekiel mentions, you remember, Noah, Daniel, and Job. And Ezekiel lived in the 6th century BC. So if Daniel's a forgery, then Ezekiel's a forgery, and of course Christ is a liar. None of which I believe. Christ endorsed this book that was written in the 6th century BC, that was written by an author known to Ezekiel, and the Dead Sea Scrolls put them way back before the events they purport to describe after they happened, according to the critic. So it is with Christ's endorsement and the validation of archaeology and contemporary writers that one can go happily to the book of Daniel and study it. Now the book of Daniel was sealed. for a time. Let's look at it. The last chapter of the book of Daniel. Once upon a time it was a sealed book. Verse 4. Thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Verse 9. Go thy way, Daniel, for thy words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Verse 10. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. The wise shall understand in the last days. And then chapter 13. Go thy way, Daniel, till the end be. For thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of days. So this book was to be sealed right until the time of the end, and then at the time of the end it was to be understood by the wise. By the wise. There's an interesting statement about the wise. Verse 3. They that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So the wise are evidently evangelists. They turn many to righteousness. And in the last days, they are going to understand this book that is now open. It was before sealed, now it's open. Turn to the book of Revelation chapter 10, and you will read the description of the opening of this book. The book of Daniel is the only book that God put a seal on. Chapter 10, verse 1, he sees a mighty angel. Verse 2, he has in his right hand a little book open. So this little book is open. And he swears in verse 6, by him who lives forever, who created the heavens and the things that are, and the earth and the things that are therein, and the sea and the things that are therein, that there shall be no more delay. Time, prophetic time, no longer. And in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, the prophecies of God are to be fulfilled. So the book of Daniel that was sealed would be opened at the time of the end. And if we study sometime the book of Revelation, you will see that the 10th chapter was fulfilled from about 1798 on to the end, to 1844 and beyond. At that time, the message of Daniel is to be opened and understood by the wise, whose great impelling, driving motive is to turn many to righteousness. Their message is righteousness by faith. They are evangelistic in their outlook. They are Daniel-based. They understand his message. They look with urgency to the last day events, for there shall be time no longer. It's run out. Now Daniel didn't understand his book. And the angel said, shush, Daniel, shush. You've done your work. You've written it down. At the time of the end, it's going to speak. Now Daniel lived, as we read in chapter 1, verse 1, during the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Jehoiakim, king of Judah. In the 24th and the 25th chapters of 2 Kings, we have a description of this time. Let's look at it and refresh our minds with the salient facts that will throw light upon this book of Daniel. 2 Kings, toward the end, the last 2 chapters, describe the closing days of the story of Judah. Chapter 24, verse 1, in his days Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar came up. Now, who is this Nebuchadnezzar? He is the son of Nabopolassar. Nabopolassar was a very strong Assyrian king. He was an old man. He had little trouble in the west. So he told his young son to take the cream of the Babylonish army and to journey through Syria and Palestine and take care of Egypt. Egyptian trade was encroaching on Assyrian trade. Egyptian Egypt was becoming stronger, and he says, put him down. Well, Nebuchadnezzar led that army very successfully. He's only a young fellow. We don't know how old he was, but he was young, 20-ish. And he came through Syria, through Palestine, defeated Egypt, came back up, surrounded Jerusalem. And right at that time he heard that his father had died. It's happened many times since. If he had delayed, there would have been some relative who would have claimed the throne. See, those days, maybe a king had many wives and many sons. And all the sons were vying for the throne of their father. It was the custom for the father then to name the son who would succeed him. David did that. Solomon did that. Many kings did that. That was the custom. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had been named the successor of Nabopolassar, but if he had not been there, somebody else would have taken the throne. So he gathered together a very small band of his friends, and he took a shortcut. It's interesting that the cuneiform records have recorded his shortcut. The way he went, what he had to do, number of days it took. And Dr. Siegfried Horn wrote his master's thesis on this Nebuchadnezzar's record of the short, quick dash that he made. If you ever go up to Syria, go to Damascus, and have got a little time, take a bus ride in the Nairn buses. Two Scotsmen about 1922 started a bus line between Damascus and Baghdad. If you look on the map, that's a blank. There's nothing there. Nothing. Just rolling sandy deserts. Hard packed as cement. Never rains. And he dashed across that. It's about 500 or 600 miles. Nowadays, the buses go, they are articulated buses. Cab part has a big container of water, and it's drawn. The bus seats about 36 or 40 people. Right across the desert. They go at night. They leave Baghdad and Damascus, but they leave Damascus in the middle of the afternoon and head east. There's a road that rattles your wisdom teeth down into the base of your spine as you're going along. But as soon as you hit the desert, it's absolutely smooth. Smooth as a billiard table. And those bus drivers set their compass by the stars. There's nothing else to go. And they drive right across the desert all night with the stars. And the men that get in, it's hot if you're going in the summer. And it was interesting to see them open the little door leading into this tank of drinking water and plop their watermelons into it to keep cool. And then after you've been 6 or 8 or 10 or 15 hours, they want to eat a nice cool watermelon, so they go swimming in there. There's a little spigot from which some people drink water too. Other people have other thoughts about that water and carry it along in a little flask on their hips. And occasionally you meet a group of people that are Hajis, coming back from Mecca, Medina. As I said, it never rained, and water is very scarce. After you have drunk all you need, you might use the rest for other purposes. But if you've got any problem, you don't use it for any purpose but drinking. And I can assure you that the atmosphere inside the bus, with all windows closed to keep the sand out and the dust out, is immense. Almost impenetrable. But very interesting. And eventually you start rattling again, and then you know you've come into civilization and you're not far away from Baghdad and Nineveh and all the other places on the Euphrates. Well, now this mad dash he took, he covered it in double quick time. Night and day, forced march with the animals that had to go and carry their own water supply with them. And he seized the throne before anyone could get it and proclaimed himself the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. And having established his kingdom, he came back to Jerusalem, and in the year 606, 605, he took it. He defeated it, and he took a contingent of prisoners of war, among whom were Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's interesting that the cuneiform tablets are available for this period. In fact, the last tablet that was dated for Nabopolassar is the 8th of August, 605. That's the last cuneiform tablet dated August 8, 605. But he must have died before that, because the first Nebuchadnezzar tablet is dated August 7, probably, though the date is smudged. It could be any time between July 9 and August 7, which indicates that some of these dispatches were sent out, but the knowledge of Nabopolassar's death didn't reach them, so they could change any dates on it. So close are the dating of the cuneiform tablets that we have no question whatever that Nebuchadnezzar became king sometime right at the end of July or right at the beginning of August, 605 BC. And when you think of how evidences of this are preserved, chills go down your spine in gratitude to God. Those tablets are tiny. You can carry them in your hand. They may be a couple of inches or 2.5 inches wide and 2 or 3 inches long, 3/4 of an inch thick. They're made of just sun-dried clay. When they were soft, with a little stylus, the cuneiform marks were put in the writing. Then they were buried. And when they were found, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of them were found. And what happened? They were put in sacks. And the sack each side of a donkey. And the donkey goes all the way back to civilization, and you know what they had become inside those sacks? 3 guesses, and they're all 3 right. Now what are they going to do? Well, after they had ruined tens and tens of thousands of them, they decided to bake them into brick first, and then bring them, or wrap them in something soft. And when you're out in the Tules, that something soft is sometimes hard to come by. And to think that in spite of all this, in spite of the thousands of years that have elapsed, that pieces of hard evidence, such as August 8, 605, who'd ever think that you could get a Nabopolassar tablet dated as precisely as that? So God has got evidence that validates and establishes. When you see that which was spoken by Daniel the prophet, then understand, then believe. Well, Judah didn't agree. They got spanked in 605, but they didn't learn the lesson. So Nebuchadnezzar came back in the year 597. 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 13. And you know there's a cuneiform tablet that dates his return? Recorded it. 1974, you can read it. Validating exactly what he did. It's only found the last 15 years, 20 years. It's there. And this time he gave them a far more severe beating. Jeremiah was there and he said, look, I told you. Declare Jerusalem an open city. Don't fight the Chaldeans. Everything is going to be right. They are the hammer of the Lord. They're the scourge of God. Don't fight them. You fight them, you'll be destroyed. Well, 11 years go by and 586 comes. That's 20 years from the first attack. They're still fighting, and now Nebuchadnezzar comes and rubs Jerusalem out. He burns down the temple. He takes most of them captive. He brings other people in there from all the neighboring tribes, and he says, we're going to take these people. So there were 3 attacks. 605, 597, 586. 586 is 2 Kings 25, 8 to 15. And 100 years before that, in Isaiah 39 verse 6, the Lord said that the Chaldeans would come. Now in this last attack, described in Jeremiah 37, 10, 11, 19, when the temple was about to be destroyed, Jeremiah felt very worried. Very, very worried. And if you care to read Jeremiah 37, 11, we are told that the armies of the Chaldeans fell away from Jerusalem. Rumors came from Egypt. And so they lifted the siege of Jerusalem for a very little while. Now I've got a Bible here that is St. Joseph's New Catholic Edition. And I bring it here because it's got a very good translation of the Apocrypha of the Old Testament. And I read in 2 Maccabees chapter 2, now it was found in the descriptions of Jeremiah the prophet that he commanded them that went into captivity to take the fire. This was the holy fire that they had to take. With other like speeches he exhorted them. It was also contained in the same writing how that the prophet, being warned by God, commanded that the tabernacle and the ark should accompany him till he came forth to the mountain where Moses went up and saw the inheritance of God. And when Jeremiah came thither, he found a hollow cave, and he carried in thither the ark and the altar of incense. And so he stopped the door. Then some of them that followed him came up to mark the place, but they could not find it. And when Jeremiah perceived it, he blamed them, saying, the place shall be unknown till God gather together the congregation of the people and receive them to mercy. And again the Lord will show these things, and the majesty of the Lord shall appear, and there shall be a cloud, as it also showed to Moses. And he showed it when Solomon prayed that the place might be sanctified to the great God. And so, we read of that siege that was lifted. Something happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He said, I'm going to hold away. And while he was away from Jerusalem, Jeremiah and some of the pious men took the ark, and several others of the vessels that weren't taken, here it's mentioned the altar of incense, and dashed away. Now in the book Prophets and Kings, if you care to read the comment on that, we are told that Jeremiah and some of the pious men in Jerusalem hid the ark in a cave near Jerusalem. There it lies hidden still, just as the Maccabees say, waiting for God's great judgment day when this ark shall once again disclose the law that was hidden in it. Now, as you think of this book of Daniel and its beginnings, endorsed by God, validated by history, by archaeology, covering a period of the disintegration of Judah, a fulfillment of many prophecies that focus to that time, every one of which has been fulfilled precisely. And then you think of this young man, perhaps 18 years of age, being taken to Babylon, mutilated with his companions, a eunuch in the house of their oppressor, yet resolving there to serve God. Then used of God of writing a book that is mentioned by Ezekiel, a contemporary, that is endorsed by Jesus Christ himself. Now you read the Gospels and see how many books Christ called by name. You look it up and see. And there are not many. But Daniel was one. And as Jesus looked beyond his time, in answer to the question of the disciples, what shall be the sign of thy coming of the end of the world? He says, read what was written by Daniel the prophet and understand when you see his predictions fulfilled. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing? So when we go into the book of Daniel, it is with the utmost confidence. This book was given by the inspiration of God. It took place, it was written by a man who lived through world-shaking, empire-shaking events. And there was given to him a line of prophecy so clear, so extensive, that no other book in the Bible contains it. It was to be sealed against all tampering hands until the time of the end. And then at the time of the end it would be opened, and men could read and understand and believe. We have come to that time. As we read this book of Daniel, as we meditate on its message, we can be certain that every word, every idea, every prediction, every sentiment comes with the endorsing signature of Jesus Christ himself. Amen. Daniel chapter 1 gives to us the date. In verse 1, the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to Jerusalem, besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God. If Judah had only learned the lesson, the rest of Jerusalem wouldn't have been broken down. The temple wouldn't have been destroyed. Its treasures wouldn't have been pillaged. Part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. I would like you to notice that two gods are brought to our notice here. The true God, the Lord. And then to the house of his God. And here the relative merits of the God of the Hebrews and the God of the Babylonians brought to the notice of all. And it seems as if the gods of Babylon are superior. And Nebuchadnezzar comes with all the backing of Nebo, their famous god, and he takes the house of Yahweh and he empties out some of the treasures. 605. 597, he takes away more of the treasures. In 586, he destroys them all. And he takes all the treasures and puts them in the house of his God there in the land of Shinar. For all intents and purposes, the God of Babylon has overthrown the God of the Israelites. The God of the Israelites couldn't defend Judah, couldn't defend the capital, couldn't even defend his own city, and Babylon is triumphant. Apparently. Thus is the name of God blasphemed in every age. When his own people take his name in vain, when his own followers show by their lives of abject futility, wickedness, indifference to him, demonstrate their impotence, what happens is that the heathen say, where is their God? The God of the Babylonians is far superior. He is overcome. Thus, I repeat, is the name of God taken in vain and blasphemed among the heathen. Now, what does God do? See, this is the great controversy. This is the great conflict between light and darkness, between day and night, between Christ and Satan. This is it. Here on a smaller scale, between Judah and Babylon. Babylon is apparently triumphant. That happened in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve defeated the representatives of true God. The seed that was sown in the field, the children of the good kingdom, are overthrown by the prince of the power of darkness. He shrugs his shoulders and he says, God's asking the impossible. These people are hopeless. God's hopeless. So God has to begin again. And this is the whole story. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to gather together all the other eunuchs, to find among them children of whom there is no blemish, well-favored, good-looking, skillful, smart, in all wisdom, cunning to know the knowledge and understanding science, such as had ability in them to stand before the king. They were to be good-looking. They were to be skilled in wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to take knowledge and apply it to the solutions of problems today and tomorrow. They could stand in the king's palace. That is, they had a presence. They were officer material, in summary. They were to be able to learn, that he might teach them learning. Some people who can't teach anything. As a teacher, I've been frustrated many times. They will not learn. In fact, I never cease to wonder at the resistance to learning shown by some people. Anything but learn. They've got all the energy to do everything else except learn. And so Nebuchadnezzar, we've got to find some people who are ready to learn. And also, they must be taught the tongue of the Chaldeans. Now, this tongue of the Chaldeans is interesting. The Chaldeans were priests. They were priests of the high god in Babylon. And their language was ancient Babylonish. Now, when I read the King James Version, I'm reading a language that's 450 years old. Older. And there are some people who don't like the King James Version because it's such an old way of liking. That's my very reason for liking it. Its obscurity is a challenge. When you read something that's so simple you can understand it, it just goes through your brain like a nice warm knife through a pat of margarine. But when you've got to hit your head against it and say, what's it saying? Then you learn more. It disciplines you to get more out of it. And so when they had to learn the language of the Chaldeans, they were going back to learn the language, the ancient language, was spoken perhaps 1,000 years before. Still the same language, but of course a dialect that's 1,000 years old. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine that he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now I'd like you to stop a moment and come face to face with this great truth. The test in every generation is on diet. Can you get the impact of that? The great controversy between Christ and Lucifer in the Garden of Eden was waged on what people should eat and shouldn't eat. The great separating factor between the true Israel of God and the mixed multitude in Exodus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on through was on what they would eat and what they would not eat. Finally wound itself down to a debate between manna and a cucumber, plus the flesh pots of Egypt. In the case of John the Baptist, here again we see that diet played a tremendous part. Romans 14, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 Corinthians 8, Acts chapter 15. All describe the crisis on diet in the early Christian church. So I would submit for your careful thought that here in this initial opening of the conflict between Jehovah and Bel, between Christ and Beelzebub, between the Lord Jesus Christ and Satan, was diet. And the king, in the kindness of his heart, prescribed the menu for these ambassadors and statesmen that he was training. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, nourishing them. Now notice another prelude. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave other names. Daniel he gave the name of Belshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Now notice those names. Daniel has the name of El at the back, and Dan means judge. Dani is the construct. El is my judge. Daniel. The next name, Hananiah. Yah is the name of Jehovah. Mishael is the name of Elohim. Azariah is the name of Yahweh. So these 4 young men, late teenagers, had been given names in which Elohim and Yahweh played a predominant part. The first thing Nebuchadnezzar does through his ministrant is to change their names to heathen names around them. Change their identity. Break them away from their contact with their homes, with their home religion. Now notice verse 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Second time, the crisis is going to be resolved on the question of what he was going to eat or drink. Now let's look at that for a few moments. This is right at the beginning of the book of Daniel. I heard somebody a week or two ago, I heard off them speaking to a friend about a part they had played in a nationally known organization. And this organization performed Friday night and Sabbath. Somebody asked this performer, what happened to you? It was that first decision, she said. The first decision. Didn't compromise the first time, had no trouble thereafter. Adam and Eve compromised the first time and had trouble ever after. Daniel decided not to compromise the first time, had no trouble ever after. He purposed in his heart not to defile himself. Now let's look back at the Bible story and get Daniel's background. See, Daniel was saturated in Hebrew learning. Genesis chapter 2. A perfect world, populated by perfect people, ruled over by a perfect God, giving perfect instruction. Genesis 1 first, verse 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, every tree which is in the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food. Now analyze that carefully. Herb bearing seed. Every tree which has the fruit yielding seed. In that one compound sentence, seed is repeated. Seed is the key. So when God put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, He told them to eat seeds and that which surrounded seeds. Fruit. You don't eat the seed of an apple generally, but you eat what's around it. In a peach, you eat what's round the bitter almond inside. In an almond, that which constitutes the flesh of the peach, in another species, has dried into a shell. So you eat the almond, hope it's not bitter. But all of the same family. In a prune, you eat the surrounding, you don't eat the almond inside. So eat what's round the seed or the seed. Grains are seeds. Legumes are seeds. Nuts are seeds. Fruit are the containers of seeds. You eat either the seed or the fruit-bearing seed. That's God's original diet. Fruits, grains, nuts. That's what God has created man to eat. You remember the story about Willis and his Model T? That little boy who decided he was going to put kerosene into his Model T? And the sad sequel that followed? During the Second World War, I ran my little puddle jumper on kerosene as well as gasoline. I never ended it on kerosene because I could never start it. But I would fill in enough kerosene to take me to 2 miles from my destination, then I would put another quart of gasoline on it and finish with gasoline. I did that for a long time, until one day I started my car and I heard an explosion, and I discovered that my muffler, instead of being a nice oval, was now flat. It was not really made to run on kerosene. And I got final trouble with it. Sometimes I would let it run, then I had to dry all the plugs up and clean out the whole inside and start all over again. You try to use a fuel that the designer didn't intend, you're going to have trouble. You try it sometime. Buttermilk and mothballs is one idea came across Willis's mind, you remember? But his dad persuaded him not to put that into the automobile. When God created Adam and Eve, He created him to function on a fuel of fruit, grains, and nuts. Then man sinned. In chapter 3, God added, verse 18 and the last phrase, "Thou shalt eat the leaves, the herbs of the field," vegetables. Leaves and stems and roots were added to the original diet after the fall. Fruits, grains, nuts constitute the ideal diet, to which were added leaves, stems, and roots. Now years went by. 1656 years after creation, the flood devastated the earth. How long was Noah in the ark? You recollect? He was in it 7 days, then it rained for 40 days, then the wind blew for 150 days, then the wind blew for another 150 days, then he sent out a bird, and a week later he sent out another bird, and a week later he sent out another bird. How long was he in the ark? 1 year and... Now how would you know? Compare Genesis 7 verse 11. The 600th year of Noah's life, the second month, the 17th day of the month. Got that? 600th year, 7th month, the 17th, the second month, the 17th day of the month. Then in verse 13 of the 8th chapter, in the 601st year, in the first month, in the first day of the month he did something. Then in the second month, verse 7, in the 27th day, he came out. So he was 1 year, 1 month, and 11 days inside the ark. Did you get that? 600th year, the second month, and the 17th day. Then in the 601st year, verse 13, the second month, and the 27th day. No, I added a month there. 1 year, and the difference between 17 and 27. That's the length of time. So he was there. If the month was a lunar month, he was in it for a solar year. If it was solar years, lunar years. The year reckoned by lunar, 354 days. The extra period of 10 and a half or 11 made it a solar year. Astronomically, this is very interesting. Chronologically, it's very interesting. Well, now this then is the 1657th year after creation. God again takes an interest in man's diet. He says to him in verse 3 of chapter 9, "Of every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. even as the green herb. See, I gave you the green herb when it fell. Now I am adding flesh. But, verse 8, flesh with the blood ye shall not eat. Now notice verse 5. And surely your blood will I require at the hand of every beast. Now what's he saying? You can eat meat, but I will require your blood at the hand of the meat you eat. In other words, the meat you eat will kill you. And I'm telling you right here, I am putting the responsibility for killing you on the meat you eat. And so I read in this Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4, page 121, God saw the ways of man were corrupt, and that he was disposed to exalt himself proudly against his Creator, to follow the inclinations of his own heart, and he permitted that long-lived race to eat animal food to shorten their sinful lives. The mechanics of reducing an age from 950 to 70 was the eating of meat. And the text that validates that is Genesis chapter 9, verses 4 and 5. You can eat the meat, but remember the meat will kill you. That meat that you eat will be the mechanical agency for shortening your long-lived life. Now why did God do that? In mercy to us. What would you think if you lived in a world with the prospect of Hitler's living 900 years? Or Stalin? 900 years. All the practice and wickedness that he had. After the first 500 years, I suppose he'd learn how to do what he wanted to do. What would you think if Al Capone could live 850 years? Terrible, wasn't it? So God saw that the wickedness would increase, and he said, I'm going to reduce them. And I'm going to keep them happy eating beefsteaks doing it. That's what he says. You can eat it, but I'm going to hold that steak you eat responsible for killing you. See, he created man to eat fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. And then man thought that mothballs and skimmed milk or buttermilk would be good. Or kerosene would be good. And he soon ran out of gas. 950, down, down, down to 70. Adam lived for 930 years. Seth lived for 912. Noah lived for 950. Their average age was well over 9. Now, Enoch is still alive. So if you add 5,000 to that, you can increase the average. But we won't. Now you take the 10 generations of beefsteak eaters. Shem lived 600, Arphax had 400, Peleg 200, Nahor 100. And you come right down like this. And by the time you come to David, he says you've got to be particularly tough to live 80 years. 70, if you're strong, you can do 80. Now, Daniel says, I am not going to eat any of that meat. He wanted pulse to eat. And I looked up this afternoon, what's that word pulse mean? Pulse. Isaiah 61:11. Isaiah 61:11. For as the earth bringeth forth her bud, as the garden causes the things that are sown in it. The Hebrew word for things that are sown in it is exactly the same Hebrew word as for the pulse that he asked. Fresh garden vegetables is what Daniel asked. Look it up. You've got the concordances, you've got the lexicons, they're all available. Daniel says, I'm not going to eat that meat. I'm not going to drink that wine. I'm going to eat fresh garden vegetables. And this was a 10-day plan. I'd like to see a 10-day plan on vegetarianism. 5-day plans on anti-nicotine, 5-day plans on dehydration from alcohol. Not really hydration, but just imagine this 10-day test. And he came out fairer, cleaned up complexion. He was fatter. I think if you had walked 1,500 miles with a chain round your neck, as a prisoner of war, mutilated, you'd probably be skinny. And so in 10 days, you could see him filling out. And the most memorable thing it did to him was to clean his brain. He was 10 times smarter than all the wise men in Babylon. I don't know how you could measure that in IQs. If you had an IQ, say, of 125, what sort of IQ would you have if you were 10 times smarter? Last camp meeting I went to, I was introduced to a boy about 13 years of age who had an IQ of 206. He's the smartest human being I ever met. He had just about memorized the Seventh-day Adventist commentaries. What he liked best were the introductory articles, and he could talk about them like a book. And I stood there looking down at him, and my mouth got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in wonder. 10 times smarter. And then Daniel is made prime minister. And then Daniel becomes an evangelist. And his most illustrious convert, to whom he gave Bible studies for about 25 years, was Nebuchadnezzar. And we'll study about this. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself by the things he ate and the things he drank. And God said, them that honor me, I will honor. Now we sing, dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone. And I heard of a little person, 4 years of age, the last Thanksgiving, going to a relative's house and seeing there a turkey. Now, I've never understood why they call them dressed turkeys, because it was completely undressed. And this little girl saw the knife going, turkey being put on the plate, and turned to one of the older people and said, aren't you going to be like Daniel? I understand that was a very solemn Thanksgiving. The taste had been left in the supermarket. They ate it, but I can imagine it tasted like gutta percha. Aren't you going to be like Daniel? In the last days, Daniel, you will stand in your lot and speak. And when you read what was written by Daniel the prophet, Jesus said, whoso readeth, let him understand. A greater than Daniel endorses Daniel because he had inspired Daniel and had surrounded him with instructions that lifted Daniel from a broken, weak, 18, 19-year-old mutilated prisoner of war to be prime minister of 2 successive world empires. Let's pray. Eternal Father, let Daniel speak in his lot in these last days, of a purpose, of a trust, of a resilient disposition that follows thee in spite of everything and everyone. We thank thee, Jesus, for endorsing this character, whom thy grace made what he was. Make us, too, what thou wouldst have us be. We ask for thy sake. Amen.
This has been another classic sermon from the archive of American Christian Ministries. This recording has been digitally reprocessed from the original audio cassette or reel-to-reel in order to make this CD available. The audio quality was improved as much as possible. International copyright, American Christian Ministries. All rights reserved. To order a copy of this or other presentations, or for a free catalog, please call toll-free 800-233-4450. International calls dial 717-652-7000. You may also order from our secure website at www.americanchristianministries.org. There you will discover the largest selection of authentic Adventist preaching available. You can trust ACM. There is no compromise here. If American Christian Ministries has been a blessing to you, why not take a moment just now and send us a note or an email with your testimony? We'll share it with our speakers and volunteer workers to encourage them. Your prayers and continued financial support are very important to ensure the continuation of this ministry as we help prepare America and the world to meet Jesus Christ. He's coming soon.